Test, test. Test, test. Alright, so I think I'll get started. So, after I raise the sensitivity a bit on my microphone, so it always seems like every time I do one of these streams, I have to raise the sensitivity on this microphone a bit. I mean, I don't know what it is about going from like Windows to Mac OS when it comes to that, but whatever. So, hey everybody, Blood Moon Bobby here. So, for those joining in or watching from the future, I am going to be discussing the Infinity Train AMA that creator Owen Dennis did. I mean, I did an AMA discussion for Star and Owl House, so I figured I'd do one with Infinity Train as well. So this was actually done on the day that book 4 was released, which was the final season. Unfortunately, unlike a lucky amount of people in the cartoon community, I couldn't watch book 4 right when it came out because I had to go to work that day, so I had to watch the episodes after I got off work. So, but that's just, I'm just trying to get through life. But yeah, so I'm gonna go from not every single question from the AMA. It's kind of, I'm just going through the ones that I thought that Owen Dennis had like the most probably the answers that fascinated me the most. If anybody else comes by, I'd also be down to talk about my own fan theories. If there's a question that was in the AMA that you would like to hear my own take, obviously I can't give like firm confirmed answers, but I could give like maybe sort of a bit of a fan theory sort of response or like my take on the answer. You feel free to ask me in the chat. This is especially one that I really like to do live because I really like interacting with you all in the chat, and also especially in this situation I would prefer to do this live. So if you want to see the full AMA itself, I have it linked down below in the description if you want to check them all out. So for this discussion, like what we've done for the Star and Owl House, I'm not gonna say the question that was asked to Dennis exactly quote unquote because for privacy reasons and that sort of thing. I'm gonna more so like paraphrase, but the answers themselves, because they come from Owen Dennis, are gonna be the quote unquote like straight up answers that he said. So yeah, so without further ado, let's get on with it. So this was probably the question that made me want to do this live discussion the most. And so somebody was asking Dennis if there was going to be a Infinity Train movie or some sort of continuation. And this is what he had to say, quote, "We wrote an Infinity Train movie. It was season 5. They passed on it, though, because they thought it didn't have a child entry point. The show is over, and no one is working on making any more of it. I'd love to make more, but it's not what Cartoon Network wants to make right now. It's very unfortunate, however. Maybe someday it'll change. Many shows, I should say, have come back after they've been canceled because of fan engagement. So anything is possible as long as fans exist." So for this one, I kind of wonder if when he said that Cartoon Network passed on it because there was no child entry point, I'm wondering if it's because as Infinity Train started to go on, it started to have some more like really intense moments. Like I remember when book 2 came out, everybody was talking about the scene where Lake kills the one of the Chrome police officers by ramming him against the Infinity Train's wheel, and you just kind of got like grinded up by the wheel. Or certainly this scene was actually what caused me to delay finishing up book 3, the scene where Simon kills Tuba. So I'm wondering if maybe they were getting concerned that Infinity Train was getting increasingly dark. I would be down to see the series come back someday, kind of like what's been going on. I know that if you go on like Twitter, there's a whole renew Infinity Train movement. I kind of wonder if in Infinity Train's case, if maybe it could come back with the Samurai Jack treatment, where Samurai Jack came back, but it was on Adult Swim, where it was allowed to be as like violent and brutal as it wanted to be. Not that every episode of Infinity Train is like that, but there are episodes where it really pushes like the limit of where it can go. So I'm wondering if maybe it could come back someday, sort of like what we saw with Nickelodeon shows like Rocko's Modern Life and Hey Arnold, where it comes back as a movie, but in this case it comes back as like a movie they could put on Adult Swim, or or maybe they'll do the thing where it's like it's on HBO Max still, but they target it much more to sort of an adult audience. So I would personally be down to see it come back someday. Although if there's anything I've learned after Gravity Falls and Star went off the air is that it can often take years. I don't even know what like Alex Hirsch is really doing, at least in terms of like making shows. I've mainly been seeing him do like voice acting work, like in Owl House and Darren FC. I know she said that she's working on something at Nickelodeon, but we still don't know what the project really is. Although, so it's not often that we see like what happens with Gigi Quintel. I think it still took a couple years after. I mean, somebody could correct me in the chat. Like, it wasn't that Close Enough came out immediately after Regular Show did. It was just that the time between Regular Show and Close Enough, it wasn't like years upon years. So maybe we could see that one of these days. I mean, if anybody is watching, you could let me know what you would like to see in Book 5 if that ever comes to fruition. I know that Owen Dennis, he talks a little bit about what he wanted to see in Book 5. And honestly, as much as I did like Book 4, I could kind of tell that it was made before the team was told that, yeah, Book 4 is going to be the final one, which leads me into the next thing. So Dennis was asked, when was he told Infinity Train was going to get canceled? And he said, quote, "I was told in December 2020. Because even though Book 4 is a decent season on its own, it is kind of head scratching as far as it being the final season. I was expecting that it was going to be something even bigger than Book 3, which is, I know that's already a tall order because Book 3 really goes to some really gritty places, but we'll see more of that as we go along. And I just noticed one of my followers is like, yeah, we need a Book 5, but but continuing on, and this was something that I was kind of like half expecting because of things that happened in Book 2 and 3. Somebody asked Dennis why there weren't like on-screen traumatic death scenes in Book 4, and he said, quote, "Didn't need it. We wanted to subvert the previous 3 seasons. Everyone will go into this one expecting some giant traumatic event or death, so we wanted to do the opposite. We went into the season with the explicit goal of we're not going to kill anyone just to try it out." And so I think that would explain why, in terms of the tone, Book 4 wasn't nearly as gritty as Book 3 and Book 2, especially Book 3. And like, I remember just thinking, because I was like almost like half expecting that if it's Infinity Train, there's going to be, it's almost like a running joke with me where it's like, if it's Infinity Train, there's going to be some sort of crazy death scene like what happened in Book 2 and 3. So I was thinking, is there going to be one in Book 4? And then it turns out there wasn't one, which, I give Owen Dennis, honestly, I kind of needed like a season after Book 3 that just kind of like toned things down a notch. I did like seeing where they went with Book 4 and taking it in a different direction. So that's one definite thing I appreciate about the series, is every season changes things up a bit in terms of like the theme and also the kinds of characters that we come across in the series. Whereas in Book 1, it was a, basically straightforward, hero, protagonist with Tulip. And then the second season, it was, even though there was Jesse and he had to get his number down, the focus, especially in the latter half of the season, was Lake separating herself. And by the way, there's going to be major spoilers. I'm not going to have like any like limitations when it comes to spoilers. It was about like Lake separating herself from Tulip, and then the third season, the characters weren't, clear-cut protagonists. If anything, they came off as really douchey and unlikable, and excuse me. But then we saw that with Grace, she went from destructive rebel to a more honest, sympathetic person, and of course Simon was just completely bananas. And then the fourth season, it focused on 2 characters, 2 best friends that started off with like the exact same number on them and that sort of thing. So yeah, so I really like how they try to change things up. So the next one, somebody was asking about if there were any scrapped ideas for cars, characters, and plot lines, or any ideas for seasons 5 through 8. And Dennis said, quote, "We don't really have rejected ideas unless you count the entirety of the rest of the show. However, this season, I'm assuming he's referring to book 4. However, this season at one point was going to be about 2 bank robbers in the Old West who got on a train and then somehow slowly turned into 2 rocker dudes from Canada. We also talked about 2 people talking across dimensions, like living out of phase with each other. We also had an idea about someone falling in love with somebody based on their tape and never having met them. I actually kind of like the idea of the latter one, but I'm just trying to like figure how it would work. I'm not saying it wouldn't work if season 4 or if there was an Infinity Train season where it was about like these 2 bank robbers who turned into like musicians. It seems like a rather drastic change, although I think that would have been like a really interesting idea. And this idea of like, I guess it could be an example of like moral transformation, sort of like what book 3 is going for. On a sort of side note, not to go off on a tangent, it's interesting how I feel like lately when it comes to talking about book 4, whenever I bring that up on social media, I seem to talk way more about like Canada. That like the conversation always diverts more into Canada than the season itself, which is cool. I mean, I was being honest when I said on Twitter that watching book 4 reminded me of when I got to go visit Canada. I went to British Columbia and Alberta. And on my downtime, I've been learning a lot about Canadian politics and culture, and I even bought the Vancouver Olympic mascots like Miga, the sea bear, right here. Honestly, I would say that she's one of my favorite Olympic mascots, and yeah, and I remember just talking on Twitter about how somebody brought up Quebec, somebody brought up Newfoundland. Both places I think are really fascinating. Yeah, especially like Quebec, I would really like to visit the Montreal Olympic Stadium someday. I mean, I know without getting into too much detail, I know it was a financial catastrophe, but I still think that the stadium looks pretty cool. But yeah, anyway, I think those are really interesting ideas. And you know what's funny is that maybe because I'm still sort of recovering from my shock and awe of book 3, but I was thinking that people were going to go in asking about book 3, but it seemed like a lot of people were really fascinated with the character Amelia, the character who used to be the false conductor in book 1, and then now she's basically making amends with 1-1, and now so the person was asking how Amelia met 1 and the functions of the train, and if there were any functions of the train that Owen Dennis wish we had seen. And so he put it this way, quote, "Number 1, that would have been we would cover in book 5. So it would have been something they would have explored in the 5th season. And the second thing is, I wish we'd seen what quarantine looks like. Also, how GOMs are made. Also, is there a caboose? I also want to see how long it actually takes a car to travel from the engine to the other end of the train. I also just wish we could have made the crazy Christmas special we had planned." Ooh. Well, now I'm just wondering, what was the Christmas special going to be? Is it like revolving around completely different characters, or would it involve going back to somebody like Tulip, Grace, or Mingy and Ryan? So it's like, maybe that could be something. I would actually like one of these days, if we get the opportunity to interview Owen Dennis. Maybe that could be something I could like ask him down the line if I ever meet him. I know, like, as much as I enjoyed getting to interview the Star and Invader Zim, like some of the members of the crew, including like Star creator Darren Nepsey. It's kind of uncertain. Like, maybe one of these days, I'm just not really sure. So, yeah, in terms of how GOMs are made, yeah, I think it would be pretty cool if we got to see what it would be like when Amelia first met One, especially because she kind of dabbled into it in book 3 when she said she took control of the train because she didn't like how one was running things, and also because she wanted to create that car that would allow her to recreate her husband from book 1. So maybe that could be something they could explore if Infinity Train comes back one of these days. And maybe even like going into maybe they could even dive into like what were the sort of things that caused Amelia's number to, like, when she's like all covered up in numbers, kind of like what happened with Simon. And maybe we could see something like that in a book 5 or a movie someday. Honestly, it's interesting is that unlike Star, where I said I'm not sure if they can do a 5th season, but I could see them doing a movie or a sequel series, with Infinity Train I could see them doing like a continuation of some sort someday, maybe even like a 5th season, or like I guess a sequel to Infinity Train or that sort of thing. Because when I think of like straightforward continuations, I think of something like Family Guy, where for a while the show was canceled, but then it's just started up back again, not as a new series, but as like they just kept going, and that sort of thing. Soup break. I'm not gonna like eat the soup off screen. I haven't had much to eat all day. Just realized the soup I'm eating, it's a broccoli soup that I made, and it's green like the numbers on the characters. Okay, so get done licking my lips. So next question was asking if Dennis would come back to do 4 more seasons, or if he's ready to move on. And he said, quote, "If everybody could come back, hell yeah. In the meantime, I'm feeling like I'm still in the grieving process and want to try out other things for a while." Which I honestly would like to see what would happen if Owen Dennis went down the sort of J.G. Quintel route, where we're with Quintel, he went from making regular show, which was basically a more family friendly show, to making Close Enough, which is just straight up adult animated series. So I would honestly like to see what would happen if Owen Dennis got his own adult series, like adult oriented series, if you will, because like especially with some of the things that he explored in Infinity Train, I'd like to see what he could do if he's like given like much more like creative freedom, to see what he can do with that. Because like I mentioned, there's certain things that happen in Infinity Train where I'm like really pushing it, So yeah. And 7 was what themes did the team was asking what themes the team wanted to explore in book 4. And Dennis said quote, "It's about relationship maintenance and communication, or lack thereof. It's also a bit about artistic endeavors versus the reality of creativity. Relationships take work and they can kind of loop back onto themselves, and that's what we were trying to show." Yeah, because a common thing throughout book 4 was that Mingy and Ryan, while still friends, they were having a sort of crisis in their friendship, and that Ryan just wanted to straight up go off and be a musician, but Mingy was concerned about the financials, and also he for a while was settling on this idea of, I'm gonna go off to university and study finance. So I think that's what Dennis was getting at. And also the sort of like risk of, when he mentioned artistic endeavors versus the reality of creativity, I think it was also getting that also goes into Mingy's concerns about like the financials, and how it seemed like Ryan was having trouble getting anywhere. But I think the reason why Ryan was struggling, it was the case where he couldn't just go off and do his career on his own. He's a much better musician when he gets to play alongside Mingy. So I think that's what was going on. So next question is asking what were Dennis's favorite scenes, and he said, quote, I really liked when Simon died, but I also really love when Mace and Lake are arguing in the antler ball. I also really love the bathroom scene when they're talking about their futures in season 4. And yeah, especially like the latter two scenes. I would even go as far as to say the scene in the antler ball is one of my favorite scenes in book 2, and especially it was a very significant scene because that was the scene where Lake realized, oh, I have to get a number in order to get off this train. And I also like how for a second, Mace was sort of like, laying down these real life questions and asking, what kind of future are you expecting? Are you going to go off to a high school and all that, and questioning her future? And Lake was like, I'm not sure yet. But it was a case of, I think she was getting at, I haven't quite figured it out, but I still want to get off this train and really separate myself from Tulip. And the other scene, yeah, I also really like the bathroom scene in 2, when we started to see much more mending of Mingy and Ryan's friendship, if you will. And despite, even though everybody, all those people in I think it was the party car, left the car, they still got to play the instruments, their musical instruments together. Simon's death scene, I was actually kind of surprised that it seemed to be a case of, to put it in very layman's terms, Simon was it seemed like a case where he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I remember the fight scene between him and Grace on the bridge, and there was that Gom chase going after both of them, and then when the Gom basically disintegrates Simon's body, which was also another really insane death scene in book 3. I remember thinking, when I saw the pictures of him when he was covered in the numbers, I thought it was going to be a thing where it's him killing Tuba was going to cause all those numbers to get on him, and in that experience itself, that was what was going to lead up to his demise. But it sounds like, if I'm thinking back of what one was saying in book 4, where in the case of Mingy and Ryan, he was basically they either learned their lessons or they just straight up die. Maybe it was just the thing where it's it's not that you're instantly gonna die if you're covered up in numbers, but the circumstances, there's gonna be bad circumstances that will lead up to the demise. So yeah, maybe that's what was going on in that scene. The next question is asking Dennis if he'd be down to do a season with a recurring character or someone that chose to live on the train. And he said, quote, actually, yes, both of those were seasons that we wanted to do. Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of throwing in my own ideas into the mix. I'm thinking, what if they did a season where a character has become so frightened of their situation that they do not want to escape the train, but they can't stay on the train forever. Maybe that could even cause a situation where the number starts to go up, and the character, maybe not personality wise, turns into a Grace or Simon, but gets into this really hair-raising situation where they cannot stay on the train, and it becomes this sort of struggle. As far as recurring characters, I kind of want to see what would happen if they brought back a character I mean, this is more so the fan side of me speaking than my objective side, but it's what if they brought back Jesse or Lake, and we get to see what's going on in their own lives? Is Lake how is she dealing with Earth? Or what happened to Grace and the Apexes? I remember before I watched book 4, somebody was asking the question, what happens with Hazel? Because we see that Hazel goes her separate ways from Grace and Simon in book 3, and that's about it. So it's whatever happened to those sort of characters. Unlike what happened in Star, though, in this case, I'm personally fine with it all being left up to ambiguity right now, because there's just, in the case of Star Wars Force of Evil, there are just certain things that happen where I'm just like, no, you can't end things like, leave an ambiguity. These are things that feel more incomplete than ambiguous. But in the case of Infinity Train, I'm kind of fine with some of the things being left to ambiguity. And the next question here, this is actually the last one I decided to include in this discussion, and that is asking if Dennis would change Book 4 if he knew it was going to be the last season. And he said, well, we wouldn't have changed it. This was the story we felt like we really needed to make after making Book 3. Book 3 put us in a certain headspace, and we decided we needed to make something else. All seasons are a reaction to the previous season. Which kind of gets to what I said earlier about how I like how with each season there always seems to be a different theme and different sort of character. And I'm going to take a bit of a soup break. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting though, because I would have expected a final season of Infinity Train to give maybe some more concrete answers when it comes to things like Amelia, and when I even still wonder, where did the Infinity Train itself come from? Like, I even wonder, like, how was it created or who created it? But I guess that's just going to be things that'll have to be like answered if they ever do some sort of continuation. So yeah, so these are my thoughts on 10 of the responses of the Infinity Train AMA. I'll keep the stream going for 10 more minutes in case anybody else shows up or they want to hear like my take on certain things of the show. Obviously, I can't give any really concrete answers unless it's about like certain elements that have already happened in the series. Maybe one of these days I could ask Owen Dennis if I ever meet up with him somewhere. I'm just not sure how. But yeah, but I'm always open to the possibility. Alright, so last call for any questions or giving my thoughts on the Infinity Train AMA. So a couple more minutes. Alright, so gonna end things off here. So for those who tuned in, thank you for checking out the live stream. Once again, I didn't want to get to every question in the AMA. I mostly pick like the 10 responses that fascinated me the most. So if you want to check out the whole AMA, it'll be linked down below in the description. If you're watching this in the future and want to hear me talk a bit more about certain things, you could let me know down below in the comment section. So once again, thank you to the Infinity Train fan base. You guys have been very respectful, and I appreciate that. So if you like this stream, give it a like and give the Blood Moon Bobby YouTube channel a hit the subscribe button. So until next time, I'll see you all later.